The crimson drops in the white snow led Liam McCoy through the worst blizzard Montana had seen in December of 1881. Each scarlet stain pulling him forward like a macabre breadcrumb trail that made his heart pound harder with every stride his horse took. He had been riding back to his ranch after delivering cattle to the railhead in Helena when he spotted the first drops, and something in his gut told him that whoever was bleeding out there in the howling wind would not survive another hour without help. The snow came down so thick he could barely see 10 feet ahead, but those drops of blood stood out like rubies against the pristine white landscape, and he followed them with grim determination. Liam was 26 years old, tall and broad-shouldered from years of working cattle ranches across Montana territory. His father had died 3 years prior, leaving him the small spread near the town of Silver Ridge, a settlement that barely counted 50 souls on a good day. He had planned to make it home before the storm hit, but the weather had turned vicious faster than anyone predicted, and now here he was, following a blood trail through a blizzard that threatened to bury them all. The trail led him up a rocky incline where the wind screamed like a wounded animal. His gelding, Dakota, fought against the storm, but Liam urged him forward, squinting through the white chaos. Then he saw her. A woman lay crumpled in the snow near a cluster of rocks, her dark hair matted with blood and ice, her dress torn and soaked through. She was not moving. Liam was off his horse in an instant, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands shook as he checked for a pulse, and relief flooded through him when he felt the faint flutter against his fingers. She was alive, but barely. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, and there was a gash across her temple that had bled profusely. Whoever had done this to her had left her to die in the storm, and the thought made rage burn hot in his chest. He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body cold as the snow itself. He secured her on Dakota as best he could, holding her against his chest as he mounted behind her. The ranch was too far, but he remembered an old line shack about 2 miles west, a shelter he and his father had used during roundups. It would have to do. The ride took forever. The wind tore at them, the snow blinding and relentless. Liam kept his arms tight around the woman, sharing what warmth he had left, talking to her even though she could not hear him. He told her to hold on, that she was going to be all right, that he would not let her die out here in this frozen hell. His words were swallowed by the storm, but he kept talking anyway. When the line shack finally appeared through the white curtain of snow, Liam nearly wept with relief. He kicked the door open and carried her inside, laying her on the narrow bunk in the corner. The shack was small and drafty, but it had a wood stove and a stack of dry firewood. He got a fire going first, his fingers numb and clumsy, then turned his attention to the woman. Her breathing was shallow, her lips tinged blue. He needed to get her out of the wet clothes before hypothermia took her, but he hesitated, propriety warring with necessity. Then he shook his head at his own foolishness. Modesty meant nothing if she froze to death. He worked quickly, removing the sodden dress and undergarments, averting his eyes as much as possible, then wrapped her in every blanket he could find in the shack. There were only 3, threadbare and musty, but they would have to do. He cleaned the wound on her head with water heated on the stove, his touch as gentle as he could manage. The gash was deep, but not as bad as he had feared. He had no medical supplies beyond a bottle of whiskey in his saddlebag, so he used that to disinfect the cut, wishing he had more to offer. The bruises on her face and arms told a story of violence that made his jaw clench. Someone had beaten her badly, then left her in the blizzard to cover their crime. As the shack warmed and the storm raged outside, Liam sat beside the bunk and watched her breathe. He held her hand, rubbing warmth back into her cold fingers, and wondered who she was. She looked young, maybe early 20s, with delicate features beneath the bruising. Her hair, once he cleaned the blood and ice from it, was a rich auburn that caught the firelight. She did not wake that night. Liam dozed in the chair beside her, jerking awake every hour to check her pulse and add wood to the fire. The storm continued its assault on the little shack, wind howling through gaps in the walls, snow piling against the door. He had never felt so isolated, so aware that they were alone in a frozen wilderness where death waited just outside the thin wooden walls. Dawn came gray and cold, but the storm had finally passed. Liam stood and stretched his aching muscles, then checked on the woman. Her color was better, her breathing stronger. He felt cautiously optimistic as he stepped outside to see to Dakota and assess their situation. The snow had drifted high against the shack, and the landscape was transformed into an alien world of white. He cleared a path to the lean to where Dakota had sheltered, fed and watered the horse, then returned inside. The woman was awake, her eyes, one green and the other swollen shut, fixed on him with fear and confusion. She tried to sit up, gasping with pain, and Liam held up his hands in a calming gesture. "Easy now," he said softly. "You are safe. I found you in the storm last night. You are hurt pretty bad." She stared at him, her good eye searching his face. When she spoke, her voice was a raspy whisper. "Who are you?" "Liam McCoy. I have a ranch near Silver Ridge. What is your name?" She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she had passed out again. Then she said, Julia Thompson." "Well, Miss Thompson, can you tell me what happened to you? Who hurt you?" Her face crumpled and tears slid down her bruised cheeks. Liam felt his heart clench at the sight. He grabbed the canteen and helped her drink, supporting her shoulders as she sipped the water. "My husband," she finally whispered. "Thomas. We came west 6 months ago, settled in Silver Ridge. He changed after we married. Started drinking, became mean. Last night he beat me worse than ever before. Said I was useless, that he was done with me. He dragged me out into the storm and left me up in those rocks. Told me the cold would solve his problem." Rage flooded through Liam, hot and fierce. "Thomas Thompson, I know him. He runs the mercantile." Julia nodded miserably. "Everyone thinks he is such a fine gentleman. Nobody knows what he is really like. They would not believe me if I told them." "I believe you," Liam said firmly. "And he is going to answer for what he did." "No," Julia said quickly, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. "Please, if you confront him, he will just say I ran off, that I was crazy. He is respected in town. I am just his wife. Nobody will take my word over his." Liam wanted to argue, but he could see the fear in her eye. She was right, he realized bitterly. In 1881, a woman had few rights, and even fewer people would believe her accusation against a respected businessman. The law was not kind to women in situations like this. "What do you want to do?" he asked instead. Julia looked down at her hands. "I do not know. I have nowhere to go, no family, no money. I suppose I should just go back and accept my lot." "Like hell you will," Liam said sharply. "That man tried to murder you. You are not going back to him." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Julia asked, and the despair in her voice cut him deep. Liam thought for a moment. "You can stay at my ranch. I need help around the place anyway. You can work for your keep, and Thompson will not touch you. I will make sure of that." Julia stared at him. "You would do that?" "You do not even know me." "I know enough. Nobody deserves what he did to you, and I am not going to stand by and let it continue." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but this time there was something like hope in her expression. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." They stayed in the lined shack for 3 more days while Julia regained her strength. Liam rode back to his ranch on the second day to get supplies and check on his livestock, returning with food, medicine, and clean clothes for Julia. The dress he brought had belonged to his mother, carefully preserved in a trunk. It was a bit old-fashioned, but Julia accepted it gratefully. During those days they talked. Liam learned that Julia was 22 years old, from Ohio originally. She had married Thomas after a brief courtship, desperate to escape her life as a seamstress in a crowded boarding house. She had thought she was getting a fresh start in Montana, a chance at a better life. Instead, she had walked into a nightmare. Liam told her about his own life, about growing up on the ranch, about his father's death and the struggle to keep the place running on his own. He talked about the harsh winters and the hard work, about the satisfaction of watching his small herd grow, about his dreams of someday having a family of his own. Julia listened with rapt attention, and Liam found himself opening up in ways he never had with anyone else. On the 4th day, they rode to his ranch. Julia sat in front of him on Dakota, and Liam kept his arms secure around her. She was still sore and weak, but the swelling in her eye had gone down and the cut on her head was healing. She had proven herself tougher than she looked, never complaining about the pain or the difficult circumstances. The McCoy ranch was small but well maintained. The house was a simple 2-room cabin with a loft, built by Liam's father 20 years earlier. There was a barn for the horses, a chicken coop, and a good well. The land stretched out in rolling hills, brown grass poking through the melting snow, with the Rocky Mountains rising in purple majesty to the west. Liam showed Julia around, suddenly self-conscious about the humble nature of his home. But Julia seemed genuinely impressed, her eyes lighting up as she took in the neat cabin and the tidy barn. "It is wonderful," she said sincerely. "You have done a fine job keeping it up." Liam felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. "The house is not much, but it is warm and dry. You can have the bedroom. I will sleep in the loft." "I could not put you out of your own bed," Julia protested. "You are hurt and you need proper rest. I will not hear any arguments about it." Julia smiled, a real smile that transformed her bruised face. "You are a stubborn man, Liam McCoy, so I have been told." Life fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Julia proved herself a capable worker despite her injuries. She took over the cooking and cleaning, tended the chickens, and helped Liam with the endless chores that came with running a ranch. At first, Liam worried she was pushing herself too hard, but Julia insisted the work helped her feel useful. They carefully avoided Silver Ridge. Liam did his trading in Helena instead, the larger town 40 miles north. He knew Thomas Thompson would be looking for Julia, and he had no doubt the man suspected she had survived the blizzard. Let him wonder. Let him worry. Liam was not ready to face Thompson yet, not while Julia was still healing, but the day would come. As winter deepened and Christmas approached, something shifted between them. Liam caught himself watching Julia as she worked, admiring the graceful way she moved, the soft sound of her humming as she kneaded bread, the way her hair caught the lamplight in the evenings. He had never felt this way about anyone before, this constant awareness, this desire to make her smile just to see her face light up. Julia seemed to feel it too. He would catch her looking at him sometimes, a softness in her expression that made his heart race. They were careful around each other, maintaining proper distance, but the air between them crackled with something unspoken. One evening in mid-January, as they sat by the fire after supper, Julia finally spoke what they had both been thinking. "Liam, I need to talk to you about something." He set down the bridle he had been mending and gave her his full attention. "All right. I am still married," she said quietly, "to Thomas, What I feel for you, what I think you might feel for me, it is wrong. I am another man's wife." Liam leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "That man tried to kill you. He lost any claim to you the moment he dragged you into that storm. The law does not see it that way. In the eyes of God and the law, I am bound to him until death. Then we need to change that." Liam stood up, pacing the small room. "There has to be a way to end the marriage. Divorce or annulment or something." Julia shook her head sadly. "Divorce is almost impossible for a woman to get, and expensive. Even if I could prove what he did, most judges would not care. A man has the right to discipline his wife, they would say." "That is not discipline, that is attempted murder." Liam's voice rose with frustration. "There has to be something we can do." "There is one thing," Julia said slowly. "If Thomas agreed to divorce me, if he wanted to end the marriage himself, it could be done. Men can get divorces much more easily than women. Why would he agree to that? He would have to admit he drove you away. Not if there was another reason, not if he could claim I was unfaithful." Julia's cheeks flushed red. "If he thought I had run off with another man, his pride would demand he divorce me." Liam stared at her, understanding dawning. "You want to make him think we are together, make it public enough that he has to act. It is risky. He could come after us, after you. Let him try." Liam's jaw set in a hard line. "I am not afraid of Thomas Thompson." "You should be," Julia whispered. "He is dangerous. I have seen what he is capable of." Liam crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. "Julia, I am not going to let him hurt you again. And if pretending to be involved with you gives you grounds to get free of him, then I will shout it from every rooftop in Montana territory." Julia's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this for me? You barely know me." "I know enough," Liam said, echoing his words from the lined shack. "I know you are brave and strong and kind. I know you deserve better than what life has given you. And I know that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." "Liam," she breathed. And then she was leaning forward and he was rising up, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle and tentative and perfect, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I am falling in love with you," Liam said, the words rushing out. "I know it is too soon. I know the situation is complicated, but I cannot help how I feel." "I am falling in love with you too," Julia whispered back. "I have been for weeks now. I was just too afraid to admit it." They spent that night talking and planning, sitting close together by the fire, holding hands like young sweethearts. It was decided that come spring, when the trails were passable, they would ride into Silver Ridge together and make their presence known. They would let people see them together, would give Thomas the ammunition he needed to divorce Julia on grounds of adultery. It was not the most honorable plan, but it was the only one that had a chance of working. The rest of the winter passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. They were careful to maintain propriety, knowing that Julia was still technically married, but the affection between them was undeniable. Liam had never been happier. Every morning he woke up knowing Julia was under his roof, and every evening they spent together talking and laughing by the fire. She told him stories about growing up in Ohio, about her mother who had died when she was young and her father who had worked himself to death in a factory. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd, about someday having children who would grow up loving this wild, beautiful land. March brought warmer weather and the first signs of spring. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. The cattle grew restless, ready for fresh pasture, and Liam and Julia prepared to put their plan into motion. They rode into Silver Ridge on a bright Saturday morning when they knew the town would be busy. Julia wore her best dress, the the one Liam had bought for her in Helena, and sat proudly beside him on the wagon seat. Her bruises had long since faded, and she looked healthy and beautiful, her auburn hair shining in the sunlight. The effect of their arrival was immediate. People stopped and stared. Women whispered behind their hands. Men's eyes went hard with judgment. And Thomas Thompson, standing outside his mercantile, went white as a sheet. Liam pulled the wagon to a stop right in front of the store. He helped Julia down, his hand lingering at her waist, making sure everyone saw. Thomas's face went from white to red, his hands clenching into fists. "Julia," he said, his voice shaking. "Where have you been? I have been worried sick." "Have you?" Julia's voice was cool and steady. "How strange, considering you left me to freeze to death in a blizzard." Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. Thomas forced a laugh. "What are you talking about? You ran off in the storm. I looked everywhere for you." "You are a liar," Liam said flatly. "She told me everything, how you beat her, how you dragged her up into the rocks and left her there. I found her half dead, following her blood trail through the snow." Thomas's eyes narrowed dangerously. "So you have been shacked up with my wife all winter. How convenient. And now you come back to town flaunting your adultery." "I saved her life," Liam shot back. "Which is more than you tried to do." "A man has the right to discipline his wife however he sees fit," Thomas said coldly. "But I see my wife has forgotten her vows. She has been living in sin with you, McCoy. That makes her an adulteress. I want a divorce." "Good," Julia said clearly. "Because I want one too. I never want to see you again, Thomas Thompson. You are a monster, and I hope everyone in this town sees that now." The crowd was murmuring now, some people looking shocked, others nodding in agreement. A few of the women looked sympathetic. Liam noticed the sheriff, a grizzled man named Wade Hollister, pushing through the crowd. "All right, folks, show is over," Hollister said gruffly. "Thompson, if you want a divorce, you can file papers with the territorial court. McCoy, Miss Thompson, I suggest you head on home." "Mrs. Thompson," Thomas spat. "She is still my wife." "Not for long," Julia said with quiet dignity. Then she turned her back on him and let Liam help her back onto the wagon. They drove out of town in silence, aware of all the eyes watching them. Once they were clear of Silver Ridge, Julia let out a shaky breath. "Well, that is done," she said. "You were magnificent," Liam told her, pride swelling in his chest. "You did not let him intimidate you for a second." "I was terrified," Julia admitted. "But I kept thinking about what you said, about not letting him hurt me anymore. And I realized that standing up to him, that was the only way to be free. He will file for divorce now. His pride will demand it, I know, and I will be free." Julia looked at him, her eyes shining. "Free to start a new life, free to choose my own path, free to be with me," Liam said softly. "If that is what you want." "It is exactly what I want." The divorce proceedings took 3 months. Thomas filed immediately, citing adultery and abandonment. Julia did not contest it, despite the damage the charges did to her reputation. She had already been judged by most of Silver Ridge, and she did not care what those people thought anymore. The only opinion that mattered to her was Liam's, and he stood by her through every ugly moment. The decree was finalized in June of 1882. Julia was officially free, no longer bound to the man who had tried to kill her. She wept when the papers arrived, relief and joy pouring out in equal measure. Liam held her close, his own eyes damp, and promised her that she would never have to be afraid again. They were married a week later in Helena, far from the prying eyes and wagging tongues of Silver Ridge. It was a simple ceremony at a small church, with only the minister and his wife as witnesses. Julia wore a new dress of pale blue, and Liam wore his best suit. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Liam kissed her with such tenderness that Julia felt her heart might burst from happiness. Their wedding night was everything Julia had dreamed of, and nothing like her nightmare marriage to Thomas. Liam was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished. They made love slowly, discovering each other, and afterward, Julia cried again, but these were tears of joy. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Liam whispered back, his arms tight around her. "You are my wife now, my true wife, and I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy." Life as Mrs. Julia McCoy was better than anything Julia had imagined. She and Liam worked the ranch together, building their dreams side by side. They expanded the herd, fixed up the house, and planted a vegetable garden that Julia tended with pride. They went into Helena for supplies, avoiding Silver Ridge entirely, and slowly built friendships with other ranching families in the area. The whispers about their scandalous beginning eventually faded. People saw how devoted they were to each other, saw the way Liam looked at Julia like she hung the moon, saw the happiness that radiated from both of them, and most folks decided that whatever had happened, it had worked out for the best. Thomas Thompson became a distant memory, a shadow that no longer had power over them. In the spring of 1883, Julia discovered she was pregnant. She told Liam over breakfast one morning, her hands trembling with excitement and nerves. Liam's face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds before settling on pure joy. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen, laughing like a boy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." Julia laughed and cried at the same time. "Are you happy?" "Happy? Julia, I am the happiest man alive." Their son was born in November of 1883 during the first snowstorm of the season. It was fitting, Julia thought, that new life should come into the world during a snowstorm when a different blizzard had nearly taken hers. They named him Daniel Thomas McCoy, giving him both of his grandfather's names, and he was perfect in every way. Liam was a natural father, patient and loving. He would walk the floor with Daniel for hours when the baby was fussy, singing off key lullabies that made Julia smile. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving horses and cattle into the wood. He talked about teaching his son to ride, to work cattle, to love the land as he did. Julia had never known such contentment. She would watch Liam with Daniel and feel her heart overflow with love. This was her family, the family she had always wanted, the life she had dreamed of. The scars of her past were still there, but they had faded, replaced by new memories of love and laughter and belonging. 2 years later, their daughter was born. They named her Mary Rose, and she had her mother's auburn hair and her father's blue eyes. Daniel, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. The cabin rang with the sounds of children's laughter, and Liam added on 2 more rooms to give the growing family more space. The ranch prospered. Liam's herd grew to over 100 head, and he hired a ranch hand to help with the work. Julia sold eggs and butter in Helena, earning money that she saved carefully, dreaming of more improvements to the house and the land. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. One evening in the summer of 1887, as they sat on the porch watching Daniel and Mary Rose play in the yard, Julia leaned her head on Liam's shoulder. "You remember the day you found me in the snow?" she asked quietly. "Every detail," Liam said. "It was the most terrifying day of my life. I thought you were going to die before I could get you to shelter." "I was ready to die," Julia admitted. "I had given up. And then you came along and refused to let me give up. You saved my life, Liam." "In every possible way." Liam turned to face her, his hand cupping her cheek. You saved mine too. I was just existing before you came along, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, a reason to hope. You gave me a family and a future. You gave me everything." "I love you," Julia said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. "I love you too, always and forever." They kissed as the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Their children's laughter floated on the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed contentedly. It was a perfect moment, a snapshot of a life built from the ashes of tragedy, a testament to the power of love and resilience. Julia thought about the trail of blood that had led Liam to her, about the blizzard that had nearly killed her, but instead had brought her to this man, this life, this happiness. She thought about how close she had come to dying in the snow, and how that terrible night had been the beginning of everything good in her life. Years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. Daniel grew tall and strong like his father, learning to rope and ride almost as soon as he could walk. Mary Rose became her mother's shadow, helping in the garden and learning to sew and cook. In 1889, another son was born, whom they named Samuel, and in 1891, a second daughter they called Elizabeth. The house grew and changed with the family. Liam built a proper 2-story addition, with bedrooms for all the children and a real parlor for Julia. She decorated it with curtains she sewed herself and furniture they bought in Helena. It became a warm, welcoming home, the kind of place where neighbors stopped by for coffee and conversation, where children from other ranches came to play. They heard occasional news of Thomas Thompson over the years. He had remarried, a widow from back east, but the marriage did not last. His business failed and he left Montana Territory, heading back to wherever he had come from. Julia felt no satisfaction in hearing of his troubles, only a vague sense of relief that he was gone from their lives permanently. In 1893, on a warm June evening, Liam and Julia celebrated their 11th wedding anniversary. The children were tucked into bed, and they sat on the porch as they had so many times before, watching the stars come out over the mountains. 11 years, Julia mused. It seems like both forever and no time at all. Best 11 years of my life, Liam said, pulling her close. Every single day with you is a gift. You are such a romantic, Julia teased, but her voice was warm. Only with you. Liam kissed her temple. Do you ever regret it? The way things happened, the scandal? Julia thought about it seriously. No. I regret that I married Thomas in the first place, but I do not regret anything that came after. If I had to go through it all again to end up here with you, I would do it in a heartbeat. You are the strongest woman I know, Liam said with quiet conviction. What you survived, what you overcame, it is extraordinary. I had help, Julia reminded him. I had you. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of knowing each other completely. Julia reflected on how far they had come from that terrible night in the blizzard. She had been broken then, beaten down and left for dead. But Liam had found her, had refused to let her go, had loved her back to life. And together they had built something beautiful and lasting. As 1895 rolled around, Daniel was nearly 12 years old and already a capable ranch hand. Mary Rose was 10, clever and quick, with a talent for figures that made her invaluable in managing the ranch accounts. Samuel at 6 was adventurous and fearless, always getting into scrapes that gave his parents gray hairs. And Elizabeth at 4 was sweet and gentle, the baby of the family who had everyone wrapped around her little finger. Liam had achieved his dream of a thriving ranch. The herd numbered over 300 head now, and he employed 3 full-time ranch hands. The land had been good to them, the cattle had multiplied, and wise trading had built them a comfortable nest egg. They were respected members of the community around Helena, known for their hard work and their strong family values. Julia had found her place in the world. She was no longer the frightened, broken woman Liam had found in the snow. She was a wife, a mother, a rancher, a pillar of her community. She helped organize church socials and school fundraisers. She taught Mary Rose to stand up for herself, to never let anyone make her feel small. She taught Daniel to respect women, to understand that strength meant protecting those weaker, never preying on them. She was determined that her children would grow up knowing what real love looked like, what a real marriage should be. One afternoon in late summer of 1896, as Julia was canning vegetables in the kitchen, she heard horses approaching. Looking out the window, she saw the sheriff from Silver Ridge, old Wade Hollister, riding up with another man she did not recognize. Her heart gave an uncomfortable lurch. They had not had dealings with anyone from Silver Ridge in years. Liam came in from the barn, and together they went out to meet the visitors. Hollister dismounted, his face somber. "McCoy, Mrs. McCoy," he greeted them. "Sorry to disturb you folks. What brings you all the way out here, Sheriff?" Liam asked, his hand finding Julia's. "Thomas Thompson is dead," Hollister said bluntly. "Thought you should know. He came back to Silver Ridge a few months ago, been drinking heavy. Got into a fight in the saloon last week and someone shot him. Died 2 days ago." Julia felt Liam's hand tighten on hers, but she felt only a strange emptiness at the news. Thomas Thompson, the man who had haunted her nightmares for so long, was gone. She waited for relief, for satisfaction, for something, but there was nothing. He was just gone, and she realized that he had stopped mattering to her years ago. "Thank you for letting us know," she said quietly. Hollister nodded. "He had no kin, no estate to speak of. Just thought you should know he was gone." He paused. "For what it is worth, Mrs. McCoy, most folks in Silver Ridge figured out the truth about what happened all those years ago. Thompson did a lot of talking when he was drunk. Nobody thinks poorly of you anymore." "I appreciate that, Sheriff," Julia said, though the words felt hollow. The opinions of Silver Ridge's citizens had long since ceased to matter to her. After the sheriff left, Liam pulled Julia into his arms. "How do you feel?" "I do not know," Julia admitted. "I thought I would feel something, but I just feel empty. He was a terrible man who did terrible things, and now he is gone, and the world is probably better for it. But I do not feel vengeful or relieved or anything really. I just feel like a chapter that ended years ago has finally been permanently closed." "That is probably healthy," Liam said, kissing her forehead. "You made your peace with what happened a long time ago. You did not need his death to do that." "No," Julia agreed. "I needed you for that, just you." That evening they gathered the children and told them what had happened. Daniel and Mary Rose were old enough to understand the basics of their mother's past, though they did not know all the details. They had always known that their mother had been married before, that her first husband had been cruel, and that their father had saved her. Now they learned that the man was dead. "Good riddance," Daniel said fiercely, and Julia had to hide a smile at her son's protective instincts. "Are you sad, Mama?" Mary Rose asked, her perceptive eyes searching her mother's face. "No, sweetheart," Julia said honestly. "I am not sad. That part of my life was over a long time ago. I have everything I need right here." Life continued its steady rhythm. The seasons turned, the children grew, and the ranch prospered. In 1898, Daniel at 15 met a girl at a church social in Helena, a sweet blonde named Sarah Miller who made him tongue-tied and clumsy. Julia and Liam watched their eldest son fall in love with amusement and tenderness, remembering their own early days. Mary Rose announced her intention to become a teacher, shocking no one who knew her. She was brilliant and patient, with a gift for explaining complex ideas in simple terms. Liam and Julia promised to help her get the education she needed, proud of their daughter's ambition. Samuel and Elizabeth were still young, full of energy and mischief, keeping their parents busy and entertained. The house was loud and chaotic, and filled with love, everything Julia had ever dreamed of during those dark days in Ohio, when she had thought marriage to Thomas Thompson was her only escape. As the new century approached, Liam and Julia stood on their porch one evening as they had done so many times over the years. They were in their early 40s now, lines of age and experience marking their faces, but their love had only deepened with time. 18 years, Liam said softly. Since I found you in that blizzard. The best 18 years, Julia said, leaning against him. You know, I used to think about that night all the time. The fear, the pain, the certainty that I was going to die. But somewhere along the way, I stopped remembering the bad parts. Now, when I think about that blizzard, I just think about you following that trail of blood through the snow. I think about how you refused to give up on me. I think about how it was the beginning of everything good. You turned my life into something worth living, Liam said, his voice rough with emotion. Before you, I was just going through the motions. After you, everything had meaning. You gave me purpose and joy and a family. You gave me a reason to wake up every morning with a smile. We saved each other, Julia said simply. That is what love does. It saves us. They stood together in the gathering dusk, two people who had found each other in the worst circumstances imaginable and built something beautiful from the ashes. Behind them, their home glowed with warm lamplight. Inside, their children laughed and talked. Around them, their land stretched fertile and peaceful. The 20th century dawned bright and full of promise. Daniel married his Sarah in 1901, and they settled on land adjacent to the McCoy Ranch, planning to build their own spread. Mary Rose went off to normal school in Helena to get her teaching certificate, writing home every week with tales of her studies and new friends. Samuel and Elizabeth continued to grow, now teenagers themselves, full of dreams and plans for their own futures. In 1903, Daniel and Sarah made Liam and Julia grandparents for the first time, a healthy boy they named Liam Thomas McCoy. Holding his grandson for the first time, Liam wept openly, overcome with the beauty of life's continuity. Julia watched her husband cradle the baby and felt her heart swell with love so profound it almost hurt. They were growing older now, silver threading through their hair, their bodies marked by years of hard work. But they were still strong, still vital, still deeply in love. Every morning, Liam still kissed Julia goodbye before heading out to work the ranch. Every evening, she still waited for him on the porch, eager to hear about his day. They still held hands like young lovers, still stole kisses in the barn when they thought no one was looking, still made each other laugh with private jokes and shared memories. In the spring of 1905, on a day so beautiful it made the heart ache, Liam and Julia rode up into the hills where he had found her that terrible December night 24 years earlier. They had never been back to the exact spot, but both of them felt it was time. They found the place where the rock stood, though the landscape looked different in spring bloom than it had in winter storm. Julia dismounted and walked to the spot where she had lain down to die all those years ago. The memory was distant now, faded like an old photograph, but still there. "I was so cold," she said quietly. "So tired. I just wanted it to be over. And then I heard your horse, heard you calling out, and I thought I was dreaming. I thought maybe I was already dead and hearing angels." Liam came to stand beside her, his arm around her waist. "I was terrified I would not find you in time. Every time I lost the trail in the snow, every time the blood drops got fainter, I thought that was it. I thought you were gone, but you did not give up. I could not. Something told me I had to keep going, like fate was pulling me forward. Julia turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. I believe it was fate. I believe we were meant to find each other, even though it took something terrible to bring us together. Everything I went through, all the pain and fear, it led me to you. And I would go through it all again, 100 times over, if it meant ending up right here, right now with you. I love you, Liam said, the words as powerful now as they had been the first time. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, always and forever. They kissed there on the hillside, two people who had survived the worst and found the best, their love a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Around them, wildflowers bloomed in riotous color, bees hummed in the warm air, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its bright song. When they rode back to the ranch that evening, their children and grandchildren were waiting for them. Daniel and Sarah with little Liam, now 2 years old and running everywhere. Mary Rose, home on break from her teaching position in Helena, pretty and confident. Samuel, nearly 18 and courting a rancher's daughter from the next valley over. Elizabeth, 16 and beautiful with a dozen boys vying for her attention. And in the house, dinner waiting, laughter echoing, love overflowing. This was what they had built from blood in the snow and terror in the night. This was what had grown from compassion and courage and determination. This was what love looked like when it was true and deep and lasting. Liam and Julia McCoy lived long lives, working their ranch well into their 60s, finally handing over the day-to-day operations to Daniel while they retired to a smaller cabin on the property. They watched their children marry and have children of their own. They celebrated birthdays and holidays and all the small moments that make up a life. They grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love never diminishing. On a quiet evening in 1925, as the world changed and modernized around them, Liam and Julia sat on the porch of their little cabin. They were both in their 70s now, their children grown and scattered, their grandchildren becoming adults themselves. They held hands and watched the sunset, content in the silence that came from a lifetime of companionship. "No regrets?" Liam asked, as he sometimes did. "Not a single one," Julia answered, as she always did. "You. Only that I did not find you sooner." Julia smiled and squeezed his hand. "You found me exactly when you were supposed to. Everything happened exactly as it should." They sat together as the stars came out, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and walked together into the light. Their love story had begun with blood in the snow and a cowboy who refused to turn away. It had grown through hardship and scandal into something beautiful and enduring. And it would continue through their children and grandchildren and all the generations to come, a legacy of love that had conquered fear and death and emerged triumphant. The trail of blood through the snow had led to life. The blizzard that should have ended everything had instead been the beginning. And the cowboy who followed that trail had found not just a woman who needed saving, but his soulmate, his partner, his forever love. In the end, that was the real miracle of that terrible December night in 1881. Not survival, though that was remarkable. Not even justice, though that came in time. The miracle was love, pure and simple, found in the most unlikely of circumstances and treasured for a lifetime. As the last light faded from the sky and the night embraced the Montana landscape, Liam and Julia McCoy went inside their cabin, still holding hands, still together, still in love. And somewhere in the heavens, the stars shone down on the ranch they had built, the family they had raised, and the love that had made it all possible. It was a fitting end to a story that had begun in darkness, but had been illuminated by the brightest light of all, the light of true love.